Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast, where we navigate controversial topics, deep dive into life-changing stories, and engage in meaningful conversation. Join us in embracing the beauty of mindful motherhood. I'm your host, Corinne Adele. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mindful Mama podcast. Today we have a guest on. This is Lisa. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, I am Lisa Andreessen. I reside in Phoenix, Arizona. I just celebrated my 15-year wedding anniversary with my husband yesterday.
Amazing.
And we have two littles, as you can see. I am a passionate pro-life activist. I've been involved in the pro-life movement for about 12 years now. And through the pro-life activism and through my pro-life views is what has led me to my position and my stance on third-party reproduction in particular.
Amazing. Okay, so today is going to be a pretty controversial conversation. If you're a regular viewer of mine, you know that that's kind of what I'm all about. So we're going to be talking about surrogacy, IVF, things like that. So I am just going to start this conversation off with, I want to know your story, because I found Lisa on TikTok and she's advocating for a lot of different things. Like she said, she's pro-life, and a lot of the things that really struck me about her is her stance on surrogacy. This is something that I've learned about over the last 4 years. I was actually pregnant with my second daughter in 2021 when I came across a podcast series. It was 3 podcasts by the Free Birth Society about the ethics of surrogacy. And I had never, ever thought about the ethics of surrogacy, how it affects the women, how it affects the babies. And it was mind-blowing. I was like, I can never, ever look at it the same. And my stances were changed immediately after listening to those podcasts. And I started sharing a little bit here and there about that. And it is very rare to find somebody else out there that has these same thoughts about the ethics and what it does to the women and the babies. So when I saw you on TikTok, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need her on the podcast. I just wanted to start this off by asking you, like, what is your story with figuring out this stance and coming to the conclusions that you have?
I was raised in a home that was not religious. We didn't like sit around the dinner table talking about pro-life issues or medical ethics or anything like that. I would say I was raised in a completely opposite home. Like none of that kind of stuff was talked about, right? But there was something in me that always just, the issue of abortion never sat right with me. It wasn't until at 17, so my husband and I, we met when we were 13.
Oh, wow.
We met at a high school football game for our local school, and started, dating shortly after that. And it wasn't until our junior year, we were 17, and I actually became pregnant. I had an unplanned pregnancy. And so that was absolutely terrifying. As women, we are told in our culture, if you get pregnant, your life is over. There is nothing for you. You can forget about, like, your dreams are gone. Like, that's what we have drilled into us over and over and over again. And so I had that pregnancy test come up positive, and I thought my life was over. I was absolutely terrified. We had a lot of very difficult conversations, and being a teenager in high school dealing with an unplanned pregnancy was absolutely horrible. I was ridiculed. I was bullied. The rumors that were going around my school, there was no support, there was no love, there was no nothing. At 9 weeks pregnant, I was home alone. My mom was a single mom who was a bartender, and she was working that night. My siblings, I don't know where they were off doing something. And I actually started miscarrying. I started bleeding at home. I was obviously scared, but I called like a nurse hotline, and I was just like, okay, I'm home alone, I'm 17. What do I do? And so they walked me through, the signs to look for of like, you need to get higher level of care if this or this is happening. Right. But otherwise, like, you just kind of have to ride it out. There's really not much that we can do at this point, type of thing. And so I called my mom. She was at work, and she basically said the same thing. So I sat alone in my bathroom at 17 at like 1 a.m, and I lost my baby, and I saw my baby, held my baby in my hand.
Yeah.
And that really brought the whole concept of like, this is not just a clump of cells. This
Yeah.
is not just all of that, like, immediately shattered when I went through that experience. But so I lost my baby at like 1 in the morning. Finally fell asleep, I think, at like 3 or 4 in the morning. At 9 in the morning, I was woken up to my mom screaming on the phone because she had gotten a call that my grandfather had had a massive heart attack at 57 and was
Wow.
found dead.
Oh my gosh.
So we buried him, had his funeral, and then my boyfriend and I at the time, we also broke up. So literally, like, my whole life fell apart in like a week's
Yeah.
period of time.
Yeah.
It felt like everything that was important to me, I lost.
Wow.
Um, and so that just completely altered me forever, like going through that experience.
Yeah.
And it was, years later, that boyfriend and I, we reconnected. We ended up getting married. We ended up having our children. I became a Christian. And that really is when God put it on my heart of, you don't have this testimony for nothing. You have
Oh
this
wow.
testimony because now you can be that support for these women that you
Yeah.
didn't have. And I knew what it was like to not have that support. And so now I get to be that for women. And so one of the things that I've been involved in a lot over the last several years in the pro-life movement is being there for women who are dealing with unplanned pregnancies to get them
Mm.
connected to community support,
Yeah.
resources, financial assistance, all of that kind of stuff. It's just amazing how God has like used me for all of that. But the whole third party reproduction thing really came in probably about, I would say, around the same time for as you, like about
Mhm.
2021,
Yeah.
2022. That's when I really started to see a lot of, on the conservative side of the aisle, there was more people popping up that were talking about it.
Mhm.
And also, it was the first time that I really started to see some headlines of couple sues fertility clinic because their embryos got switched, or couple has an abortion because they were implanted with the wrong embryo, or like, I had never really seen those things, and it was the first time that I was really seeing it in like the mainstream media talking about it. And I was like, as pro-lifers, we need to be educated on this. Like, we need to
Mhm.
know how to talk about this because we're not removed from this.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was up until then that I was like, I really need to sit down and do some research, really figure out, like, dive into this and figure out what my position is, where I stand on it, why, how, and how to have this discussion, because this is really coming up as being important and relevant.
I want to know, how do people typically respond when they hear your stance on surrogacy? And also, just give us a statement of what is your stance on surrogacy currently?
Yeah, they don't like it. They're
Yeah.
not happy. I always felt safer in the like, just the general pro-life, anti-abortion space, right? At least usually, not always, but usually you're like, the conservative pro-lifers, they've got me. Like, I at least have those people in my camp, usually. When it comes to surrogacy and IVF and third party reproduction, you don't even have those people. Surrogacy and IVF and third party reproduction takes it to an even another level of just absolute hatred. For me specifically, I think that this is a calling from the Lord. And so
Yeah.
that's what continues to push me and like drive me to continue to share the truth and to stand on truth and to give people the truth even when they don't want to hear it. Basically, my general stance on surrogacy is that it's one of the largest human rights violations of our time,
Mhm.
um, outside of obviously the elective abortion issue, which is also another massive human rights violation. But when it comes to third party reproduction in general, it's the massive amount of loss of life, like I said, that people are just generally not aware of that goes into the process. But also, the fact that we are buying and selling human
Mhm.
beings are being commodified,
Yeah.
right? You are renting a woman's womb and all of the ethical things that go into that process. And all of the research and everything that I've done over the years has led me to the fact that the majority of these outcomes are not good. There's a lot of negative that is going on. And when it comes to surrogacy in general, you really, like, you have to search for this information. It is not willingly and openly provided
No,
to you.
not at
You
all.
have to go down some really dark rabbit holes on the internet to find this stuff.
Hmm.
And that's what I tell people when we're in conversation and they're like, "Well, I don't see this." I'm like, "You're not going to see it.
Yeah.
They are actively hiding this information from you. You have to seek out the truth." And
Hmm.
so if you're not willing to like jump in and I get that not everybody's as passionate about it as I am, but they want you to just see the happy family that walks off into the sunset and it's all unicorns and rainbows, right?
Yeah.
They don't want you to see some of the dark, shady things that are happening behind the scenes here. They don't want you to know about the multitude of contested surrogacy cases that we've had in this country for basically since the conception of surrogacy, since it started.
Yeah.
The amount of women who are being taken advantage of. These are women, there's a reason why impoverished women are targeted for
Yeah.
surrogacy
Oh yeah.
specifically. The other problem that I run into a lot is the US bubble, right? The American bubble of, well, we know what surrogacy is here. These women are consenting to it, which we can get into the whole medical consent issue, but they're consenting to it. There's contracts signed. There's lawyers involved. They have some protections. So surrogacy is fine. And I'm like, you have got to get outside of the bubble that is the United States. Because when you start to open up into the global world of surrogacy and you get into a lot of these other countries, especially
Yeah.
in the third world, your mind is going to be blown about the things that are happening.
Right.
It's absolutely horrific and atrocious what is happening to these women and children. Alarm bells should go off for people when they see the amount of countries that have banned surrogacy.
Oh my gosh, I know. Isn't it banned in Europe, or is it
Oh,
specifically Italy
it
right
is
now?
heavily regulated in Europe, but
I
I
think
mean,
they
we're
only allow
talking.
traditional surrogacy, correct? And there can
They
be
only allow
no.
altruistic, so no
Okay.
commercial surrogacy. You
Okay.
cannot buy a surrogate. It has to be purely voluntary.
Right.
A woman has to do it on her own volition, just completely voluntary. There's no money exchange.
But I have seen loopholes of that, of,
Yes.
bartering. So you're going to pay my rent for me, you're going to buy my groceries. There's ways to go around that, and the woman who is gestating the baby to still obviously benefit from it.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's definitely loopholes. We also see a lot of people that are in countries where it's banned or heavily regulated. They'll just leave and go buy a surrogate in another country.
Hmm.
The other thing is when you get outside of the US bubble and you actually look at a lot of these other countries, the other thing that you're realizing is Americans are the number one buyer. We are the supplier of these other women in these other countries because it's a lot cheaper to get a surrogate over in Georgia or the Ukraine, which those are heavy, heavy surrogate hotspots around the
Okay.
globe. They have massive surrogate industries. But, and whenever like one country shuts down, it'll just pop up somewhere else. Like
Right.
another country will take over as like the industry of where it's coming from. So, but yeah, American IPs are one of the number one consumers of surrogates in the third world.
Okay.
We are the ones that are seeking out these impoverished women and taking advantage of them and buying their wombs because in the US, a surrogate is going to run you anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000.
Yeah.
Over in Georgia, you can get a surrogate for about $10,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, these women are basically paid pennies if they see any money at all. A lot of times what we're seeing is that they're being promised money and they're never actually being given any of that money. So, yeah, my biggest thing to people is if you're wanting to learn about this, again, you've got to go find the information because it's not just willingly provided to you. Something that I learned very early on about being a pro-life advocate is anything negative reflecting on abortion, they don't want you to see it. There's a reason that they don't want you to see it. There's a reason they keep it tucked away, right? Or they just don't release information or they skew information. It's the same thing with surrogacy and IVF and all of this like third-party reproduction stuff. You have to go looking for it intentionally because it's not just going to like be dropped in your lap. And I think that's what a lot of people, one is like, well, it can't be too bad because it's not put in front of me that it's bad. And it's like, you're not going to have it put in front of you that it's bad. Like you have to actually go like look for this information and seek out these women's stories and hear some of the things that these surrogates are going through and these children who are conceived in this way, and are a lot of them now are finally getting to the age of adulthood where
Mm-hmm.
they're coming out and talking about being donor conceived and
Right.
talking about, being conceived through this, medical technology and stuff. And like now we're starting to hear their side of like what it was like being raised in this way, or having it concealed from them that they were donor conceived at
Right.
all, and like the
Right.
problems that have arisen from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, at the end of the day, it just comes down to the fact that it is a human rights violation. We are commodifying women and children for the buying and selling of human beings,
Mm-hmm.
all of the issues that surround that, and the fact that, again, surrogacy has been banned in multiple places all over the world because of its heavy connections to human rights violations, human trafficking, and the black market.
As women, our bodies are constantly evolving, and Indigo Luna gets that. Their beautiful, sustainable clothing made from natural fibers is designed with you in mind. Embracing every curve and change, including the seasons of pregnancy and breastfeeding, rooted in slow fashion, Indigo Luna prioritizes ethical production and timeless designs. As a newly postpartum mother, they really helped me rediscover my confidence and style. Feel good in clothes that honor your body and the planet. Use my link in the show notes to save 10% off your order at indigoluna.com. Wow. Yeah, that's good. Just going back to the first time that my mind and my eyes were open to surrogacy, the biggest thing that like I'm passionate about in motherhood is like going back to our roots and our design, like how God
Mhm.
designed us to be mothers. Surrogacy goes completely against the mother baby bond that God literally created. So a lot of people in this very small circle are starting to talk about,
Yes.
this idea. And also sometimes it will get kind of compared to adoption, and people will be like, well, what's the difference, right? Adoption is mending a broken situation, and there's still so much trauma involved. So
Right.
much trauma. So much trauma. But we're doing our best to mend this broken situation, whereas surrogacy is creating one. We're creating a broken situation. I
Yes, you
think
are
the
intentionally buying and paying for a child to rip them away from the only
Yes.
mother that they've known for 9 months.
Right.
And what damage is that doing? And the fact that we're just not acknowledging that at all
No,
is
no one thinks about the
wild.
baby. Nobody thinks about
No.
the baby. What I always tell people is the surro baby has no idea that they're a surro baby. They don't know that they're going to be ripped away from their mother. It doesn't matter if it's genetic or not, if it's a traditional surrogate or not. That baby that is growing in whoever they're calling themselves womb believes that that is their mother, because that's who they are growing in. That's who they know. That's who they're sharing blood with. That's who they're hearing. That's the heartbeat that they are listening to every single day, the voice that they're hearing. It's literally shaping their brain when they are being developed inside of this woman. So, what then happens after birth, and they are whisked away to the intending parent, that baby's brain is processing the death of their mother. They start life with a primal wound immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They are told, oh, my mother is dead. And how traumatic is that to start your life that way? Of a baby essentially being like, yep, my mom's dead and now I'm with somebody else. And we don't ever sit back and think about that issue, because we're like, well, they're being taken care of by a loving family. And that's true for the most part. Like, these people who are purchasing these babies are probably great parents. They have the best intentions. Maybe they have had infertility issues for years, whatever. Like, I don't doubt that they're taking amazing care of these children. I really don't. But we're not like getting out of that bubble of just being so excited for the parents, the intending parents. It's always about the intending parents. It's never about that baby that we've now created that is literally starting their life with so much trauma, believing that their mother is dead, and the surrogate as well. One thing that I also realized is these surrogates, they have to disassociate so badly and they lie to themselves that they are okay with what's happening. They're okay with growing a baby inside of their womb and then giving it to somebody else. They will lie to themselves about this and cover it in, this is such an amazing thing that you're doing. You're so incredible. What an amazing gift. You're a beautiful human. What a sacrifice, which, yeah, I mean, all of that is true, but they won't sit with themselves. There are some surrogates that are starting to pop up. I did do an interview with a lady who birthed twins, and she was able to start really seeing, like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And kind of shared her story. There are very few surrogates that are now kind of able to consciously sit with the uncomfortableness of what they've done and are starting to realize, like, oh my gosh, okay, wow, maybe I don't feel good about this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I do feel wrong. Maybe I do feel violated. Maybe I do feel taken advantage of. It's easier to disassociate than it is to really sit with the uncomfortableness of what we're doing because it's so clouded with these poor parents that can't conceive and want a baby so badly.
Right. Yeah, people get so attached to the infertility part of it and the emotions connected to that, which I mean, I understand. I can't imagine what it's like to want a baby so badly and not be able to have one, right? There's definitely an emotional part of that that needs to be acknowledged. I'm not saying that we should ignore that. Of course not. It's just we have to start pointing people towards options that are more ethically better. Again, there are more ethical ways to become a parent, and we need to start talking about those options more instead of immediately pointing people towards the fertility industry. But unfortunately, that's immediately where a lot of people are routed to.
It's because it's the quickest option. It's like the easiest, it's the
Well, and
fast
it's money.
track.
It all comes down to the almighty dollar. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's expected, I believe by like 2030, it's expected to be like a $35 billion global industry. Surrogacy just alone. That's
Right.
not including IVF. That's not including all of the other of it, just surrogacy. So, I mean, in the United States alone, we have, roughly 8 million infertile women that are seeking fertility treatment. They're
Right.
spending roughly $3 billion a year
Right.
on fertility treatments and all of that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that the fertility industry wants to make money. And so this is also why we don't see the regulation. This is like a lot of people will be like, well, what is your issue with it? How is it a human rights violation? I'm like, well, there's a whole lot to that. But one of the things is that this is the wild, wild west, you guys.
Yeah.
The fertility industry, from IVF to sperm and egg donation to surrogacy, all of it, it is not federally legislated, not even in the United States. And when you get into a lot of these other countries, forget about it. Like we have a little bit here, but even here in the United States at the state level, because again, there's nothing at the federal level, but even at the individual state level, the most you're really going to see is when it comes to contracts and how
Right.
those have to be handled and how parental rights are transferred, from the surrogate to the IPs. That's really only thing that you're going to see is like the court part of it. Like the legal rights part of it is what you're going to see. There's nothing about how these processes have to be handled by these clinics. There's nothing that says how the surrogate agencies have to operate. And a lot of women who are surrogates or have been surrogates, they get really upset when you talk about this. And they'll say, no, I had to do XYZ to become a surrogate. And I said, correct. They can have their own process in place, but they're not mandated to do any of that.
Right.
They can have their own policies. They can have their own ways of how they want to do things. But there's nothing legal or legislated saying they must do XYZ. It's just they can do it if they want to, or they can choose not to. And you'll find that even when you talk to surrogates who've worked with a couple different agencies and things, they'll say like, yeah, there are agencies out there that are really bad, that are like horrible, like don't go to these people. And then there are agencies that are doing things more by the quote unquote book,
Right.
right? Um, but at the end of the day, even these contracts, like even like we have this warped idea of, well, surrogates in the United States are protected because there's lawyers involved and there's contracts and there's, did you know that as soon as that contract is signed, the lawyers that are provided to the surrogate by her agency are no longer her legal representation
Ugh.
after that? So a lot of these women will start to have issues pop up
Yep.
during their pregnancy
Right.
after they've signed on the dotted line, right? They've already done the deed and they think, "Oh, well, I still have these lawyers. The
No.
agency is providing these lawyers to me. I have legal protection." No, ma'am. Once you sign on the dotted line, those lawyers no longer work for you. A lot of women will start to have issues and they'll call them up and be like, "Well, you're my lawyer, right?" And they're like, "No, the moment you signed that paperwork, I'm no longer your representation. You've got to go find your own representation." And a lot of these women don't get into surrogacy because they have a lot of money, right? They
Right.
get into surrogacy because they need the money.
Yeah.
They're already financially struggling. And then now they've got to go out and find legal representation to support them, like to support them during whatever it is that they have going on.
Well, it's similar to when you sign your body away to the military.
Yeah.
Uh, you're
Which is
signing your
ironic
body.
because military wives are one of the number one targets for surrogacy and egg donation.
It's you're signing your body away to the intended parents. I have heard crazy things where at first, this is kind of the story that I hear very often is there is a woman who wants to be a surrogate. She feels this is her calling. She wants to help someone grow their family. She thinks it's from God, whatever it may be, right? She's
Mhm.
excited about this process. She goes into the process. She gets matched with a couple. Everything is beautiful. She's crying. They're crying. They're so happy. They're going to create a baby together. The intended parents are phenomenal. And then she gets pregnant. And then the intended mother is all of a sudden like, you can't have sex with your husband. You have to eat this specific diet. I want you to be doing X, Y, Z. You can't put this in your body. You can't go this place. I don't want you doing this. And then all throughout the pregnancy, it's like, I want you to get these vaccines. You're going to do this. Oh, and then you're going to be induced and you can't say anything. Oh, you're going to have a C-section because that's what I want. Like you don't have rights. You think you do, but the parents are the upper hand. So a lot of
Yeah.
the times these women are then like in this pregnancy and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like what I thought I was getting into, I have no rights. I
Yeah, I
have
mean,
to do everything that the mother is telling me to do." And it's
they get into it being promised this relationship, right? You'll
yes,
you'll see a lot on surrogate
family.
websites.
You're going to be a
Yeah,
part of our
you'll
family.
see
We
that
love
you're going to go
you.
on this journey. They always
Yes.
explain it as a
Yes.
journey. It's a surrogate journey.
Yep.
You're going to, give this great amazing gift to this couple and you're going to have this relationship
Yeah.
and they even promise them being a part of the child's life
Oh
even moving
yeah.
forward.
You're going to be the
Nine-
auntie. We're going to have you come
90%
to
of
the
the time that
birthday.
does not come to fruition.
No, because as soon as the baby is there by surrogate, I've heard so many stories of that. It's
Oh
like,
yeah,
I didn't get
they get dropped.
updates. I
Yeah.
didn't get pictures. They won't answer my calls. They got weird after I delivered the baby. I was like chopped liver. I
Yep.
felt horrid
And like you
after.
said, even during the pregnancy, a lot of times that can even start during the
It
pregnancy
does.
where it shifts from this relationship, this journey to you are a womb. You
Oh
are a
my
womb
gosh.
that is
Yes.
hosting our child, and that is it. You are seen as the body. That is,
Well,
that's it.
What I, one of my thought process on this is I think that there's a jealousy component of the intended mother. And I think that probably begins in pregnancy. So at first, maybe there's not so much of a jealousy component with the surrogate, but once that once I always call the surrogate the mom because that's what the baby believes,
Mhm.
and
She is.
but okay, so the surrogate, right? She gets pregnant. Now this mom who's infertile, she's been trying to have babies for 15 years, whatever, is like, oh my gosh, another woman is able to carry my baby and I can't. And then that's when kind of the power struggle starts, the jealousy begins. And then once they can get rid of the surrogate, she's like, I want you out of here because you make me feel bad about myself. And that's a
Right.
really hard dynamic. Like, I can't imagine how hard that would be. So that's my theory of what I've seen, and like knowing women's emotions and things, is maybe that's the component that there is.
Well, you also have the fact that I think there's another dynamic that I don't think people really look at. And ironically, something we can look towards in our own culture that gives us an insight into this is The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
A lot of people try to like say that us as pro-lifers like would be the would be Gilead, and I'm like, no, that's the elites who are supporting surrogacy and all of
Right.
the celebrities that are like pushing this stuff out. That's not me as a pro-life advocate. I am
Right.
against all of that, right? But we see where when June becomes pregnant, the immediate switch in Serena Joy and how she treats her
Right.
immediately begins abusing her, because you are not only pregnant, you are pregnant by her husband. And when
Right.
these women are having this, usually like sperm donation, right, is being used. The husband's sperm is being implanted into this woman.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the woman's egg is used, sometimes another third party
Right.
egg is being donated. It just depends.
Yeah.
But if his sperm is being used, she is pregnant by her husband, technically.
Yeah.
It's another woman carrying your husband's baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, we see where that bitterness, jealousy, and abuse can definitely crop up. Uh, we're human at the end of the
Of
day,
course.
and a lot of that stuff can definitely take over. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's so many issues for these women too, and like, yes, I want to focus on the babies too. I do think that like you said, no one is talking about the children, no one is thinking about the children, because at the end of the day, the IPs are the clients, they are the paying clients. This is with IVF, this is with all of it, right? The parents who are coming in, who are spending thousands and thousands of dollars, they're the client. They're the one that we're talking to. We need to make them happy, right? We're not, yeah, nobody is thinking about the long-term effects for these children and
Right.
anything like that. A lot of that is not discussed until way after the fact. But, the outcomes from the little bit of research, and I say little, and I do mean little, because
Our skin is our biggest organ, which means it absorbs all of the toxins we are exposing ourselves to every day. Because of this, I'm very mindful about the skincare and body care I use for myself. Osea formulates their skincare with seaweed because it's a superfood rich in vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. Different species of seaweed can provide a myriad of benefits, including anti aging and moisturization. They source their seaweed from different places around the world based on its high mineral content and combines it with other naturally derived ingredients. Use my code Corinne10 for 10% off, or see the link in my show notes.
nobody has really invested into a lot of research behind surrogacy. And this is one of the things I get asked a lot of, well, what do you have to back this? Now, we do have some statistics and things, we do have some information. I'm not going to say we have nothing. But what we do have, again, is little, because a lot of this stuff is trying to be kept under wraps. Again, you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar industry that wants to make money. They
Right.
don't want to be regulated, because regulation means loss of money. And so
Mm-hmm.
they like being unregulated. They like being able to do whatever they want, however they want,
Yeah.
because they want to make money, right?
Well,
And so
something
this
that
is
blew my mind, and while
mhm,
you're talking about the like not being regulated, is
mhm,
the fact that if you want to be an intending parent, you don't have to qualify to be an intending parent.
no.
Anybody can buy
Exactly.
a baby.
If you can pony up the
And
cash,
we have seen horrific stories of
yes.
men purchasing babies to molest them, to sexually
Yes, they
abuse
are
them.
literally purchasing their own sexual abuse victims.
Yes. And it's allowed because there's no regulation. Like, at least with the adoption industry, intending
Mhm.
parents are regulated. There are things that have to put in place. And I'm not super educated on that, so I don't know if it needs to be more or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
All I
Like
know
this
is
is
it's
that's why
regulated.
adoption is as expensive as it is. This is where people are
Right.
being like, well, even with adoption, you're buying a baby. And I'm like, not really, because the majority of money in adoption isn't going towards like the buying of the child. It's going
Right.
into lawyers. It's
Right.
going into the legal aspect. It's
Yeah.
going into background checks,
Yeah.
home checks, all of the things that you have to have in place. Or if you're fostering, right, you have to get
Totally.
licensed. You have to go through classes.
Yep. It's like six
Um,
months of training that you have to go
yeah,
to
I think
become a
even with
foster
adoption, a
parent.
lot of agencies require classes and things as well. So
Right.
that's going into home checks, background checks, fingerprinting, again, lawyers, legal documentation that has to be signed.
Right.
That like the adoption process is expensive because as it has gotten more safe for these children, it has gotten more expensive because you have to pay to like vet these people
Yeah.
and verify that they are who they say they are,
Yep.
and they're going to dig into every aspect of your life.
Right.
Anybody that you know who has fostered a child or adopted a child, they're getting into, I'm not just talking about your social media, I'm talking, they're digging into your financial records.
Right.
They're going back into your tax history like 10 years, 10 plus years. Um, they're digging into every aspect of your life, top to bottom, to make sure that you are qualified to parent this child.
Yeah.
Now, are there still cases where things have been missed and bad people have gotten a hold of children, even through
Mm-hmm.
adoption? Yes, of course. There's going to be people that slip through the cracks.
Of
But
course.
for the most part, adoption has gotten safer for children. But yeah, when it comes to surrogacy, this is why we see a lot of people that they know that they would not qualify through the adoption process. They
Oh,
know
I
that they
didn't even
would
think
they
of
know
that.
that they would not be approved. And so
Wow.
if they have the money, again, if they can pony up the cash, they will skirt the vetting and go straight to surrogacy because they know
Oh.
that it's just open-ended.
Hmm.
Especially, yes, we have very well documented cases,
Yeah.
multiple, of child sexual abuse predators
Hmm.
who are purchasing children through surrogacy to literally create their own personal victim
Yeah.
to have right there in their home.
Right.
And it is absolutely heartbreaking and earth shattering when you read some of these documented cases. And there were even times where the government found out that they were predators and were buying children. And like there's a case in Australia of a married couple. It was a husband and wife. The husband had been imprisoned multiple times for sexually abusing minor children, and he had been in and out of prison. I think like 2 or 3 different times for just this specific thing, was rape and sexual assault on children specifically. And they were allowed to purchase a child through surrogacy. And when the global world found out about this, it was absolute chaos. People were in an uproar over this Australian couple. Knowing this man's history, how could you possibly give this child to this couple?
Hmm.
The judge sided with the couple. The judge sided with the couple that they could keep the baby. And of course, they created a girl because that's what he
Wanted.
likes. Yes. And yeah, and so the judge cited that they could keep this child, but in the documentation it says that CPS has to check in with them regularly and they have to give updates on when they move and all of this stuff. But one of the other stipulations of them keeping this child was that every year, once she reached a year old, every year there was a book that they had made that that lays out that her father is a predator and that she was created through surrogacy, and this book has to be read to this child every year so that she knows all of this information, and that she is not allowed to like be alone with her own father, which of course like they're living in the same household, so like
Uh,
how you're going to even enforce that, I
yeah.
don't know. um but yeah, I mean, the things that have been allowed, even when it's well known, even when it is well known that these men are sexual predators,
Hmm.
they are still openly giving children to these individuals. I mean, it's absolutely wild. Now, there are situations where it wasn't known until after they'd already purchased the child and had been abusing the child over a period of time.
Hmm.
And then the abuse was found out that, it all came to light. But again, even in situations of men who have open history, have
Yeah.
served jail time for being a pedophile, and yet are allowed to purchase and keep these children in their homes. It is
Yeah.
absolutely astounding. Like when you really start to dig into like the things that are going on. That's why I tell people, when you open this can of worms, you will never be able to put the lid back
No.
on the
Mm-mm.
jar
Mm-mm.
because it's absolutely insane, the stuff that is going on and is being allowed to happen to these children. Surrogacy is literally, it's a giant experiment. It is the largest experiment in human history, one of, that is just like, they're guinea pigs. These women and children are guinea pigs. They have no idea truly what they are doing. Like I said, like once they open this Pandora's box, so to speak, you can't put the lid back on the box.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's just rife with human rights violations and massive medical ethics problems that nobody is asking these questions, because at the end of the day, they just want a baby. They have that tunnel vision. I want a baby. I want a baby. I need a baby. And that's all that they can focus on. They have blinders on. They can't see anything else.
Right.
And so that's where, like, opening up the conversation and really talking about this, I'm hoping, is removing some of those blinders, but then also not just saying, like, don't do this, don't do that, but again, going into some of the things of, like, what are the alternatives? What can we do instead? How can we seek more ethical forms of parenting, and talk about that too, and give them some alternatives outside of just, like, don't do third-party reproduction.
Right. And like like God does wire us to want families. Like we are
Yes,
like
wanting
it
a
is a
biological
good,
child is a great
it's
thing.
a good and like righteous thing to want a family. One thing that I kind of want to bring up about surrogacy is I think a lot of people, because I'm a Christian, will be like, well, why wouldn't you be for surrogacy? Because it's literally creating life, and you're pro-life, and it's also in the Bible, right?
I get that a lot, yeah.
Something that I decided to look into, because I was like, yeah, you're right, traditional surrogacy is absolutely in the Bible. I'm gonna read about this. Is every single case of traditional surrogacy in the Bible was due to
Absolutely horrible
humans
outcome.
not listening to God, not believing that God had a plan for their life, and taking matters into their own hands to
And it
create a
always ends
human
in
being.
absolute disaster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are multiple cases of this. Just because something is in the Bible does not mean that God is condoning this behavior. In fact, every single case was a sinful case. It was the sinful fleshly desire, which is a good, like, okay, so wanting to have a child is a good desire, but then
Right.
our flesh can come in and make it a not so good situation, not so good desire, and these women and men are taking it into their own hands and creating a baby. I mean, one of the cases of surrogacy, the baby who was born of traditional surrogacy in the Bible was literally cursed by God. He was cursed because he was a surrogate baby. And how sad is that? Like, if you're a Christian and you're using that excuse, I really, really highly recommend you actually reading through all of the cases of surrogacy in the Bible, because none of them are God's will. None of them are God saying, go create this baby through traditional surrogacy. In fact, the woman is usually, like, one of the women ran away. And God was like, nope, you gotta
Payback.
go back. I'll take care of you, but you've got to go back.
Right.
Like, it's not, none of these cases are beautiful cases of like, I'm going to carry this baby for you. This is God's plan. God told me to do this and it's beautiful and everyone's happy. No, every single case is a disaster.
Yes.
And people don't realize that. People also just don't read their Bibles, and they'll just try and
No.
pick things and
Yeah, I get that a lot of, like, well, you're pro-life, so you should be for anything that's going to create life,
yeah.
right? And I said, okay, but here's the thing. I am pro-life, which the definition of pro-life is anti-abortion, right? I'm anti-abortion. And sometimes that euthanasia will be thrown in that definition as well. It just depends. But basically it comes down to, I am not pro-natalist. Pro-natalist is a totally different category of people. This is going to be like the Elon Musks of the world.
Okay.
Pro-natalists believe that you should make as many children in your life as you possibly can, and that you don't even necessarily have to parent those children. Again, look at Elon Musk, all of the children that he's creating with all of these women, but he's not actually a part of these children's lives, right? So no, I do not believe that every single individual who can have children should have children. I don't believe that you should have as many children as you possibly can. That is not my belief. My belief is that we should protect human life from conception until natural death as much as we possibly can. This is
Mm-hmm.
why I'm anti-abortion, anti-euthanasia, and anti-death penalty. Personally,
Ooh, I love
I
hearing that from you
believe
because
in a
most
pro-life ethic.
Christians are for the death penalty, and I'm over here like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're
I know.
pro-life, but only if it comes to murdering somebody because you want them murdered. Hello? That's a huge gap here. Let's talk about this because my belief is like, yeah, of course, our flesh, I would want that pedophile dead. But also, I don't know how God is going to intervene. Like I don't think we have the say of who lives and who dies. That is God's ultimate decision. So for me, it's
Yeah. At the end of the day, I'm just like, and when you talk to people who are pro death penalty, it's always from a place of, yeah, vengeance.
it is.
And literally, the Bible tells us, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? Like,
Hmm.
vengeance is
Yes.
for the Lord. Justice is for the Lord. That's
Mm-hmm.
not like for us to be. And also, if we were under a righteous government, maybe, but our government is not
Right.
righteous. I don't want
Right.
our government actively invested in ending the lives of their own citizens. It really comes down to the fact that I don't trust our government, and therefore I don't want them actively supporting, financially providing the death to their own citizens. That is never going to bode well for us. This is why,
Right.
again, I don't support euthanasia, I don't support
Mm-hmm.
abortion, and I don't support the death penalty. At the end of the day, our government should never have a vested interest in ending our lives. That's
Right.
not going to work out well for any of us, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I
wild.
always tell people I'm pro-life womb to tomb, and that includes all of the horrific people that, yeah, probably, you know what? We all deserve death. That's why Jesus came down and died on the cross for us, you know?
Yep.
But like I would never want to be responsible for killing a human being that God would could come and like
Redeem.
their salvation is on the line. And as much as I would want that person dead because I think they deserve it, I don't know what God is going to do. I don't know if he's going to intervene and that person is going to receive salvation at the last second before, like, I don't
Look at
know.
the Apostle Paul. Paul was
Oh
slaughtering
my
Christians for
gosh.
the Roman government.
Yeah.
Jesus appears to him on the road to Damascus, and he suddenly, like, people think, oh, did he just say, oh, I went from slaughtering Christians to now I'm just going to become one? No, there was a moment where the Lord literally changed him, right? He
Yep.
had this massive conversion and went
Hmm.
from slaughtering Christians in mass for the
Right.
government, persecuting them, to becoming one of the greatest Bible authors and prophets of our time, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there's absolutely redemption for anybody and everybody. And so, I mean, obviously that's like a whole nother like can of worms
It's
that
a
we could
whole
go
other
down.
topic.
That's a whole nother topic. Maybe we
Yeah.
should do another podcast on that. But
Yeah.
all that to say is I'm not pro-natalist. I don't think that everybody should have children just because they can. And also I think that we need to start asking the question of, just because we can, should we?
Mm-hmm.
Just because medicine can, should it?
Mm.
Do the ends justify the means? And I think a lot of the answers here is when you really dig into this stuff and really get educated on it, the ends do not justify the means.
Mm.
And again, what are we truly doing long term to these women, to these children?
Mm-hmm.
We just don't really know. Like, we know some of it, and what we do know is bad enough, but we don't even, I don't even think that we have begun to see the full extent of what we have done in the realm of third party reproduction. It is just now really
Yeah.
starting to come to light again, because a lot of these children, a lot of them are just now, they're becoming adults and they're starting to
Right.
share their stories. You know, some of the first IVF babies are starting to like come out and talk
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah.
And um, people that were donor conceived are starting to come out and share their stories. And yeah, it's just absolutely horrific, the things that we're doing to human beings, all in the name of money, really.
I'm just so curious to see, like, in the future, when, if and when studies start coming out, because, like I said before, one thing that I always advocate for is going back to our roots and God's design. And God's design was never for, I mean, think about how tiny sperm cells are and how tiny our eggs are. our God's design was never for a human to be conceived outside of the womb. His
Right.
design was for our babies to be knit together inside of our womb. So even just thinking about, okay, we're going to pull the egg out, we're going to pull the sperm out, we're going to put it in a dish, we're going to stick them together, we're going to let it grow, then we'll implant it maybe back into the genetic mother, maybe not, maybe it'll be somebody else, and we're going to, then let that baby grow. Like, what is that doing to us on a cellular and spiritual level? We don't talk about that stuff. I actually saw this TikTok that was so intriguing to me. This gal came on, she had her 1 year old, it was an IVF baby. She was making this joke and she goes, does anyone else's IVF baby, are they always cold? I think it's because my baby was in the freezer for a couple of years. Ha ha ha. Maybe that's why my baby's always so cold. She's making a joke of it, and I'm over here like, oh my gosh. What
Yeah.
if that is part of that baby's cells? Like, that baby was frozen for how many years? And like, what is that doing on a cellular level to your child? Like, there is truth into even these tiny, minute little things because of how we're creating humans. And then
I
talk
mean,
about,
we know through research that the longer that they're frozen, the higher the risk is that they're going to have medical issues.
right,
The longer that an embryo is frozen, they're at a significantly increased risk for genetic issues, defects,
placental
and
issues.
also
There's a
just have you
lot of
looked into the
placental.
cancer risk? Have you looked into the amount of IVF conceived children and their increased cancer risk? Like,
Uh-uh.
and their autism rates are so much higher.
Interesting.
A child conceived through IVF is 4 times more likely to be autistic. They are 26% increased risk for being stillborn. Like,
I
the
have
amount of
heard the stillbirth,
complications
the
is just
stillbirth
crazy.
thing, and I recently heard that IVF placentas are not
Yes.
so great. So that's why a lot of the time when a woman is conceiving a baby through IVF, they do have early inductions. It's because of the stillbirth rate and their
Yes.
placentas. And I found that very fascinating as well.
Yeah, and our prematurity rate,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
they're at a much higher risk, even with surrogacy, right? Because a lot of times, again, you have to have IVF usually to have surrogacy at this day and age.
Right.
They go hand in hand, right? And so this is the other thing too that is not disclosed to a lot of these women. A lot of surrogates are not told that a surrogate pregnancy is significantly higher risk than a
It
biological pregnancy.
is.
A lot of these women, not only are they on fertility meds and all
Yeah.
of the things,
The
which they're not told
injections.
about the high increased risk for cancer through all these
Oh
fertility
my
meds
gosh,
either,
that's a
which is
whole
another thing that we
other.
can get
Yes.
into.
Can of
But
worms.
like, they are not told the increased risk to
Hmm.
their labors and deliveries and the low birth weights in these babies, the prematurity in these babies, all of these things. They are at a significant risk for preeclampsia,
Hmm.
um, just so many HELP syndrome, like all of these things go drastically increase when you're dealing with a surrogate pregnancy.
It's
And this is not
interesting.
being disclosed to a lot of these women. We have had surrogates lose their lives.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Don't you have to sign something where you're like, I realize that I'm risking my life and also,
I don't even know that they really do. That's what I'm saying. A lot
okay.
of times, the medical part of it is really not discussed with them.
Well, I think the gal that I interviewed, she told me that she had to sign something where she realizes that she could like have a hysterectomy
Okay,
or
yeah,
be done have like she needed to be done having babies after this or think about like this could be your last pregnancy because of how high risk surrogate pregnancies are because of all of the different things that you had mentioned. One
yeah.
thing that I do want to talk about is one thing I've noticed very heavily, and I watch surrogacy journeys on TikTok
Oh, yeah.
of women that are
They
going through
always make me sick to my stomach.
these journeys. And one thing that I noticed, I just noted, I was like, huh, that's so interesting, is um, these women after they do their surrogacy journeys and they give that baby to the intending mother is that they are so hit with baby fever after it. It is a primal need for them to have their own child
Mm-hmm.
uh, and need to conceive as soon as possible. And the lady that I interviewed, she said the same thing. She was like, it actually became something that was like, so I was obsessed. My husband was like
I have to fill
having
the void.
issues with me because I needed to get pregnant immediately, have my own baby, nurse my own baby, keep my own baby. I've watched it happen, and I
Yeah.
find it so interesting because it's like, well, yeah, because we are never meant to be away from our young. Even if you're
Nope.
telling yourself that that's not your young, we're never meant to be separate from our babies. That's traumatic for the baby, but traumatic for the mother.
Yeah.
Traumatic for the mother that's carrying that baby.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so a little bit of research and study that has been done, which one of the places that people can go if they want more information is the Center for Bioethics and Culture.
Okay,
They're a
I'm gonna
really
write
great
that down.
resource. They've actually funded a lot of their own research because nobody else will do it,
Okay.
unfortunately. Again, this is just an area where a lot of people they don't want to know the truth. They just want to keep their eye on the prize, which is having a baby, right? Um, and so they've funded a lot of their own research. They've also done multiple documentaries on surrogacy, as well as IVF, and as well as egg donation and women that are being sought for egg donation, and the risk around that. But one of the things that I was going to say is not only is it not really disclosed to them the risk that they're taking by carrying a surrogate pregnancy specifically, these women are on fertility medicines, but in the beginning, when they first get pregnant, they're on anti rejection medicine because their
Mm.
body is trying to reject this. They recognize that this is not
Oh my
their
gosh,
child.
wow.
And the antibodies will
Okay.
attack this child. That's why the miscarriage rate is so high with surrogate pregnancies,
Oh.
is because, especially if, I mean, again,
Even
now that we're
in
using.
IVF in general. IVF in
Yeah,
general,
it
miscarriage
is,
rate's
but
so
when it's their
high.
own biological egg, it's a little bit
Right.
better because the
Right.
receptors recognize the biology there.
Totally.
Now, once you get past a certain point, it doesn't really matter. But when it
Right.
comes to like implantation in the very beginning stages of that
Mm.
embryo, growing and developing, the body is like, this is foreign. You are not related to me, and it attacks.
Mm.
And so that's why they miscarry a lot, especially because, like I said, we're using a lot of gestational carriers where the egg and the sperm is not,
Yeah.
it's not related. But when you get into, there's a lot of research. I don't know if you've ever looked into this, but one of the things that I also talk about too is birth control and
Oh yeah,
like the things
I'm
that have
against
messed with
birth
birth control,
control.
yes, with women. But one of the things that we've noticed is that when women get off of birth control, they're not attracted to their spouses.
Yep.
They don't like them because birth control actually like alters
Yes.
your
Mhm.
attraction, your
Yep.
pheromones, all of
Yep.
your hormones, everything changes. And so they get off of birth
No.
control and they're looking at this person like,
Who
who
are
are
you?
you? But one of the things that they've also found is that you actually have to be like hormonally like compatible with your spouse.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that they're finding with people that are dealing with infertility is that there are certain men that like his sperm, like her body will just immediately attack his sperm every single
Wow.
time because her immune system will recognize it as a foreign like invader and just attack the sperm. It will not accept it like for the egg, right?
What? This is a, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that.
Yes.
That's
And so when you are
crazy.
actually like hormonally and pheromonally like,
Incompatible.
yes. So they're actually
Wow.
finding that some of these couples are just like, it's not necessarily that you're infertile. That's like a
Yep.
lot of this like unknown fertility. It could just literally be there's nothing wrong with either of you. You got all the working parts,
Well,
everything is good, but you just are not chemically aligned with one another,
how
if
many
that makes sense.
times have women said it's unexplained
Oh yeah.
infertility?
Yeah, it's like the number one like cause that is not a cause that like they don't
My mind
know.
is blown. I didn't even
Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah, and so it's like when you are introducing birth control and all this other stuff and it's
Hmm.
messing you completely up, and then come to find out like you're not even, and this is one of the things like you'll hear from women, not that I advocate for this. I obviously only think that marriage and sex and babies go hand in hand. I don't think people should be having sex outside of marriage or having children outside of marriage biblically anyway. But you will see cases of women who were with one man, they could not
Yeah.
conceive. They could not get pregnant.
Yep.
Then they broke up or whatever, went their separate ways. Maybe the infertility was part of the reason that they broke up. I don't know. And then she will be with someone else, gets pregnant immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just because their chemistry was not like it was like like not lining
Hmm.
up. And her immune system is rejecting his sperm. Like So this is a huge
Another case that
problem.
I've seen a lot too is women who get severe HG, so severe morning sickness, because the man's sperm is responsible for creating the placenta, and the placenta
Yes.
is what can make the mom sick. So I have seen women have severe HG with one partner, and then they get with another partner and have another baby, and they have no morning sickness. So there's so much validity to this conversation, the compatibility of,
But imagine as a surrogate where you're having random sperm
right.
introduced into your body, sometimes in multiple pregnancies, right?
Mm,
Some of these surrogates are carrying three, four, five surrogate
wow.
pregnancies, and you have incompatible sperm that her body is not only is it not her egg, which it can attack that anyway, but then you have the aspect of the male aspect of like this is not, this is foreign. So
Mm,
you even have women who are not compatible with their own spouses,
yeah.
their own husbands, whatever. But then with a surrogate situation, you have things being introduced into her body that are like of a whole nother like outside situation. We also see where women who carry surrogate pregnancies are their divorce rate is also increased because
Really?
this this creates a dynamic that okay, so we know again military wives are significantly targeted for third party reproduction.
Hmm.
If you haven't looked into this, you should. Again, not only are they living in more of a poverty financial
Yeah.
situation where they need the money a lot of times, but they're in a situation where a lot of them have had children. A lot of military families, they get married young, they have babies right away, they're
Hmm.
having babies in their early 20s. In order to be a surrogate,
It took me 5 years to finally find non toxic makeup that's not only nourishing to my skin, but actually performs well. As a previous makeup artist myself, I absolutely refuse to spend my money on makeup products that do not work. Crunchi is the brand that finally converted me. They have personally banished over 10,000 ingredients that do not make the cut into their products, that unfortunately is in most of the makeup we use day in and day out. I'm personally obsessed with their cream concealers and their cream blushes, and I finally started wearing lipstick again because I actually feel good about kissing my babies while wearing it. So their lip pencils are a must. Click the link in my show notes and add the code ADVOCATE10 for 10% off your first purchase with Crunchi. That's Crunchy with an I. And make sure to use my link or the code will not work.
you have to already have one or two children of your own to even be considered as a surrogate. They have to show that you are physically, your body can carry a pregnancy to term,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so these women are poor, they're in financial need, they are a lot of times fertile and able to carry their own babies at a young age. And then they're also targeted because they have a husband who is deployed for a significant period of time,
Mm.
9 months to a year. They have a husband who's not there, he's not in the equation. And a lot of these women are like, okay, well, I'm a stay at home mom. I am taking care of these children, but this allows me the ability to continue to stay home, take care of my babies, but still be able to provide financially.
Yeah.
And so they think that surrogacy and egg donation is like that's their window to be like, yes, I can do like the side hustle to make money, right? And it is pretty lucrative money. Um, and so they're targeted a lot. Like you will literally see like on military bases where they will do ads and
Oh my
like
gosh.
PR campaigns specifically in military towns and on military bases to target military wives for all of this third party reproduction. They are like the perfect specimens for them, unfortunately. They're very vulnerable to this industry. But what we see is that men who are oftentimes innately they want to provide, right?
Hmm.
They have it built into them to provide for their family, whether that be financially, but then also to be the protector, right? And so what we're seeing in surrogate situations is that the men who have wives who are carrying these babies for other couples,
Hmm.
they really get this whole like it kind of emasculates them,
Right.
and they get this whole well, I'm not providing, I'm not
Well,
protecting,
also, it's another
and they're seeing
man's
their wives be
baby.
hurt through this process and they can't do anything about it. And then it's like, oh, but we needed the money, and so now like she's doing this to provide the money, but I should be providing the money, but I'm not. And like it just creates, and I mean, she's carrying another man's baby, and like what does that do to you mentally and emotionally and in your
It's a
relationship? And
lot of
yeah.
a disassociation. Like I was saying before, these women
Yep.
truly do have to disassociate in the name of doing something incredible for someone else. The men either are not able to disassociate to what the heck, my wife is carrying another man's baby, or they do disassociate to it. And it's, very interesting
Right. So even
situation.
in these women's own lives and their own relationships, we are seeing that the more surrogates that people are talking to, it causes a lot of problems within their own marriages and
Yeah.
their own dynamics between their own relationship, because you can't just carry a pregnancy for someone and think, oh, it's just not going to affect anything.
I'm
Of
just going to
course
be
it
pregnant
is.
and then I'm going to give birth. Like,
And then
what?
it just all goes away and like it's all good and it's all a fairy tale. And
Oh
it's
my
like,
goodness.
guys, like we've got to start like really having some real conversations here about like this affects even their other children. Like when you talk to
Yeah.
surrogates
Oh
who have
my
carried
gosh.
multiple pregnancies, and can you imagine explaining to your biological children, mommy's pregnant, but this baby's not hers. You're going
Hmm.
to deliver this child that is going to be immediately ripped away
Yeah.
and taken away from you. And your children have spent 9 months knowing that their mother is pregnant and they're like anticipating the coming of this baby.
Yeah.
But then the baby never comes and like there's no sibling
Oh my
there. And
gosh.
like I mean, what it does to them, even. And like surrogates have talked about this, like what it does to not only their marriages, their
Their
relationships, but also
kids.
their biological children.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
just,
I'm
there's
just
so many
imagining my
dynamics.
son. My son,
So
he's
many.
so aware. And like through my
Hmm.
pregnancies, we'd be looking at the apps and looking at how big the baby is and all of that. Like, I cannot imagine. He would not be able to wrap his brain around that situation at all.
No.
Like, I've talked to him about the babies that I lost, and he'll bring up those babies all the time. Mommy was actually pregnant 5 times and she has 2 babies in heaven. Like, he talks about that as he's
Yeah.
almost 6. He wasn't even 2 yet when I had my losses. So he was there, but he has no memory of it. But even
Right.
just him talking about like how we had 2 other babies that we lost, I cannot imagine him going through. I mean, this maybe people are gonna get upset at me for mentioning this, but like a stillborn situation, like how traumatic it is for the siblings to go through that situation of like losing a
Right.
sibling, um, and having a hard time with that closure. I'm kind of seeing it a little bit similar from the children's view of
Right.
like they aren't actually getting this sibling. And maybe it's explained to them over and over again, but still, like, that is very traumatic for a child to try and
Just the
wrap their.
concept of there's a baby there and then it's
Yeah.
gone. And
Hmm.
like, what is that? Like, their brain doesn't, fully understand all of this that's happening, but it's
Right.
there and then it's ripped away. And like, you know, yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, it's just, there's so many dynamics that are not being
It's so much
discussed.
deeper. It's so much deeper than people even realize. Like, there's so many different
Yeah.
avenues, so many different conversations we could have, so many different things to bring up, like how predatory the marketing is, the ads that you see of women who are like, I was a
So
surrogate and I
predatory.
took my kids on vacation with the money. I had enough for a down payment on a house. It is so predatory. I have been offered thousands of dollars as an influencer, okay, to promote surrogacy. Just to
Okay, yeah.
share, you could become a surrogate. An agency sent me
Hmm.
this whole thing. They're like, we want to give you several $1,000s to do a 60-second ad to target women and tell them how much money they can make. What a wonderful blessing it is that they're giving somebody else a child. And I'm like, have you watched my content? I don't think you know who you are
You're like,
sending this
no.
to. And you know what I did is I used that to advocate against surrogacy. And I showed my followers. I was like, look at this. Look at how predatory it is. They're literally even targeting me, a
Hmm.
mother that they know I have an audience that trusts me and, is very, like, loves watching my content. They want to use me. They're targeting me to target other women, and they're going to give me several $1,000s to do it. How
Yeah, people
insane is
don't
that?
realize. I've had people, so many people just be in denial of like, they're not doing that. That's not, and I'm like, Yeah, it is.
I
Like,
have
you
proof.
realize how sterile this whole thing is. There are literally apps like
Oh yeah.
Tinder
Yeah.
where you go
Yeah.
on and you
Yeah.
literally swipe right or
Yeah.
swipe left on egg donors, where you
Yeah.
have their whole profile of their eye color, hair
Yep.
color, how many children they have, their IQs, what they
Oh
went
my
to
God.
school for, all their degrees, all of it laid out. They have the same thing for surrogates. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Literally, you are swiping left or right on a surrogate, and it's whether you like match with that individual, and then like, I mean, their whole profile is laid out there.
Here's another thing I want to quickly mention is even if you're not carrying a biological, you're not a traditional surrogate at all. It's literally somebody else's genetics. Something
Mhm.
that's really interesting about our body is if that woman's body does end up carrying that baby to term, one thing that our body does do is it will flip on genes onto that baby that will give it more of a look of you or your family. Like your body is still working to try and genetically make that baby as much like you and your family as it can, because that's how smart our bodies are. Like your blood is literally mixing with that baby's blood
Right.
because that's how pregnancy works. And
Hmm.
also, not to mention that new study that came out a couple of years ago that said like every single baby you've ever carried, their DNA like lives inside of you forever.
Yep.
We are not meant to get pregnant with babies and send them off to somebody else. Give
Right.
them to somebody. That is not the design. That's not our human. Whether or not you believe in God, I do not care. It is not the human
Biology.
design.
Yeah.
It's not biology. It's
Right.
not biology.
No,
Wow.
I mean, and it's wild to me that, like, because there's so many people that disassociate from that part of it. I literally had a guy on a live one day, and I think I have the recording up on my page, where he literally says that the bond that is created in pregnancy is pseudoscience.
Hmm.
This is someone who is going to school to get a degree in biology.
Wow.
This is what we are teaching people. And I said,
So our
you
babies
realize
are
that
robots.
I
They're
said, like,
robots.
you realize that they have done studies on babies in utero where they literally play their mother's voice, and they are
Oh
actually
yeah.
noticing their connection to their voice
Yes.
in utero, and then when they're outside, it's literally how they regulate their heart rate, their body
Yeah.
temperature, everything is by the smell of their mother,
Yes.
her heartbeat
Yep.
that they recognize, and her voice.
Yeah.
And I said, not only that, my children recognized my husband's
Oh yeah.
voice when they were born
Yep.
because of him talking to them.
Even if you have
Like,
dogs, they could recognize your animals
all
barking.
kinds of things. Like, it's just wild to me that people are just completely disassociating the bond that happens in pregnancy in order to, again, for money, profit, and because all they can
Hmm.
see is the tunnel vision of I want a baby. And so they're just like removing all of the science that has been drilled into us.
Yeah.
You know, as mothers, the moment that we become pregnant, what do they drill into us from day one? When that baby is born, you put them on your chest. The skin to skin is so important.
The
That is
golden
like
hour.
for your hormones,
Hmm.
your breast milk to come in, like all of that stuff, that process. Again, this is how your baby is going to regulate themselves. Even
Yep.
mom, she's regulating herself, right?
Temperature is a huge one, as
Everything.
well as their heart rate and literally their nervous system. Their
Yes.
nervous system is being developed in the womb by the mother's nervous system. We
Yep.
are so intertwined. That's why I use the term mother baby. It's one word, mother baby. It's not two, it's mother baby. Because our babies don't even register that they are separate from us until about 6 months of age. That's
Right.
usually when stranger danger starts to go into play, because then they realize, like, oh my gosh, I am actually separate. And also, another thing I find really interesting is that's when um, all of my babies have said dada at 6 months old. And it's because their dad is the only separate person that they recognize. Because
Mm-hmm.
me and my baby, we are one, we're mother baby. But
Mm-hmm.
dad, oh, he's separate, and I recognize that he's separate.
Right. Yeah, it's wild to me, like the things that we are willing to, like you said, disassociate from,
Hmm.
and just we'll just compartmentalize this and put it off to the side because our wants and our
Right,
desires are taking over,
right.
and we want what we want, and damn it, we're gonna
Yeah.
like get what we want by any means necessary. And again, like we have laws in this country that you cannot separate a puppy
I know.
from its mother until it is 8 weeks
I
and it has
know.
been properly weaned.
Yeah.
But yet, human babies,
Yes.
we are literally experimenting on
Mhm.
them, and we are creating them to rip them away from the only mother who has carried them, who we
Mhm.
know that they bond to in pregnancy. This has been scientifically and biologically researched, proven that
Mhm.
that bond is happening. And then you're severing that at birth. And I mean, even if we don't have a ton of research on surrogacy, which we don't, but even the little bit that we do have, again, all shows negative outcomes for the babies, for the mothers. Surrogate mothers are at an increased risk for postpartum depression, postpartum
Yeah.
anxiety. All of that stuff shoots
Yeah.
through the roof for them. Their depression, like you said, once that baby is ripped away, they immediately feel that, like, I need to fill this void,
Yeah.
because they just don't know what to do with themselves when they don't have that baby, right? We see this with women who have placed their children for adoption, and we
Of
see this
course.
with adoptees.
Of course.
The research that we have on adoptees is significant,
Yes.
decades and decades of research on adoptees. How do you think that surrogacy is any different?
The
You are taking a
trauma
baby,
is the same. The
it's
trauma
worse in
is the
surrogacy, actually.
same. Like,
Surrogate children actually do worse than even adopted
oh,
children do. So, like, the little bit of research that we do have shows that yes, all of them have that wound that happens at birth, that
yeah.
trauma that happens
The
from being
primal
severed
wound.
from the birth mother, right?
Yeah.
But adoptive children are actually able to rebound a little bit more.
Well, because
And
it's
why
a
I think
broken situation that's being mended and they can understand like
Well, I think that it's
why.
because the adoptive parents, if they are adopted and trauma informed, which
Hmm.
anybody who's adopting in this day and age, with all of the information that we have on child development and stuff, there's no reason why they shouldn't be
Yeah.
adoptive or trauma informed before they're adopting a child, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so if they are properly, like, informed on all of this that's happening, they're able to speak into that experience with their child, and talk through it with them and walk through that. And, yes, this child is going to start asking questions of, where did I come from?
Yeah.
Why did my mom give me up for adoption? And, we were able to come in, and this is why we were called to adopt you. And, like, have that whole conversation with them as an ongoing conversation all throughout their life as they're growing up, right? The difference with a surrogate child is that the parents are the ones who inflicted the problem. They literally
Mm.
paid money to have
Yeah.
them created in a lab, to have them put into this woman to rip them away. So the child doesn't feel like they can openly express how they're
Mm.
feeling, because they're going to their parent and they're saying, you did this to me,
Yeah.
you created me and did this to me. So the parents are not able to walk through that with the child in the same way where an adoptive parent can,
Hmm.
because they didn't, like, create the initial problem of this child not having a home, right?
Hmm.
They're trying to be the solution to the problem of a child who otherwise would not have a home. Surrogacy creates the child intentionally to rip them away.
Yeah.
So you can't even have that dialogue with your parents, because how do you go to your parents and say, you did this to me? Like, thanks. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, that's just, yeah, like, it's a whole dynamic. And so we see that adoptive children, while they still have issues and they struggle, they actually rebound a lot better
Mm.
and still have better emotional and mental bandwidth to, like, wrap their brain around it all eventually, right? As adults, surrogate children still continue to struggle significantly because they're not able to have an open
Right.
conversation and an open dialogue around that with their parents, unless at some point the parents realize what they've done is wrong, which maybe
It's
at some
so
point they would.
slim.
But for the
So
most part,
slim.
people get really defensive about
Of
surrogacy. They're
course.
they're very protective over it. Same with IVF.
Hmm.
Like, anytime you discuss it, they don't want to talk about, like, what they've done. Like, looking yourself in the mirror and acknowledging what you have done is one of the most difficult things.
Yeah.
That, I mean, even women that I'm talking to who are post abortive, like, one of the most difficult things to do is to look into the mirror and say,
Hmm.
I ended the life of my own child,
Yeah.
and coming to terms with that, dealing with it so that they can heal from it and eventually be able to move forward, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with creating children through third party reproduction. You have to eventually look yourself in the mirror, and a lot of people just, they can't do that.
Yeah.
It takes a very strong individual to be able to do that, right?
Well, and you have to be
So,
very emotionally, consciously, spiritually aware. And
Right.
most
And
people are
most people
not. They won't allow themselves to be because it is harder to be. It's more painful to be. It's a lot of work to be. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be. You know, like
aren't.
I didn't go into looking into surrogacy to have this position. I never once ever thought like I would have this position. I always thought you like, oh, I would never do that because I could never do that. And most women say I could never do that for a reason.
Right.
But no, I used to think it was beautiful before I knew the intricacies and the details and how deep it is. Like going back to that man who said that it's pseudoscience that babies are bonded to their mother in the womb. I'm going to link the three podcast episodes that literally flipped this whole thing for me. One of
Mm-hmm.
them is an interview with a surrogate who is an ex surrogate or whatever, former surrogate who regrets deeply what she's done. And in her story, she mentions how after she gave birth to this baby, the intended parent had called her like a week or two, I don't know how long after the baby was given to her, and said, "This baby will not stop crying.
Oh
Can
yeah,
you
that's very common.
please
Mm-hmm.
send me a video of your voice or of you singing? I don't know what else to do. This baby won't stop crying." So she did. She sent a video. Oh my gosh, it makes me want to freaking cry. Of
Yeah, it's
herself
so
singing
heartbreaking.
to send it to that baby. And
Yeah.
instantly, the surrogate mom, or sorry, the intended parent said that baby stopped crying.
Yeah, they're in a lot of distress. Like they will have the surrogate mothers even they'll have them weeks leading up to their birth. They'll have them sleep with blankets and things to get their scent on it because these babies are yeah, they can't once they're ripped from her, they can't regulate, right? We've already talked about their body temperature,
Yeah.
their nervous system, all of that. And so they just cry and cry and cry because they're calling out for their mother and
Yeah.
she's not coming. And who are these random strangers that you put me with? I don't know these people. They're not familiar to
It
me.
doesn't matter how capable the intended parents are. Those
Nope.
intended parents are
They
not
can't fix
supposed to
biology,
be
right?
with
Right.
the baby. The baby is supposed to be with the mother, the person who
Right.
carried them.
There was one surrogate that I listened to her interview, and she was talking about how the babies, she had twins that were in the NICU. Because a lot of these babies, again, a lot
Yeah,
of surrogate
they
babies are
do.
premature. They have a lot of birth
Yep.
complications and things like that, right? And so she said that, like, not only was the baby, like, taken to give to the IPs, but then they were put in the NICU. So, I mean, like, she hadn't seen them for several days. She was recovering from a C section in the hospital, but right as she was about to leave to get discharged, she was able to actually go over to the NICU and actually see them for the first time. And when she was in the room, the babies were calm and quiet, and the nurses literally said, "This is the calmest that we have seen them in days since they were born."
Wow.
Like you, because her just going in and talking to them, they recognized her voice,
Hmm.
and they immediately like leveled out. All of their stats on the monitors leveled, and the nurses were like, "These children have not been this chill like in days." Like I mean, and this is very common. You will see this in surrogate stories over and over and over again, where these children are just in absolute distress.
Yeah.
And yeah, they either want something with her scent on it, or they want something a recording of her voice, or something like that to calm these children because they just. And again, so what is all that dysregulation doing to them? Like we
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we don't know what we're doing to these children, and what we do know is already like heartbreaking enough. And again, it's all in the name of money. It's really in the name of we want to make money and we want babies. And so we're going to do whatever we need to do it. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, I get asked a lot. Okay, so women are signing contracts. They're saying that they're agreeing to this, they're consenting to it, right? Here's the thing, guys, that a lot of people don't realize. Like, oh, if a woman wants to do this, she wants to make money for her family, why can't she? Why can't she just do this? Well, when money is being exchanged, which the largest portion of surrogacy that is happening globally in the United States specifically, but even at the global level, is commercial surrogacy. These women are being paid to, again, rent their wombs, right?
And also,
Money is
if they're not, there's still bartering happening. There is.
there is, yeah,
There's
usually.
bartering. It's very rare. It's very rare for a surrogate to receive nothing.
Yeah,
Like, it is
very, very.
so minute. So minute.
Absolutely. For the majority, there is money and financial gain being exchanged here.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that people don't realize, so in medical ethics, if you look into the study of any type of medical ethics, which is funny because these doctors have to go through this in school, lawyers like go through this in school, like they do a whole section on ethics and like what is medical consent and like all of this. But I mean, obviously, when it comes to the state of medical consent in this country, it's absolutely abysmal. We have so many issues around medical consent. It's not even funny. But all that to say, a woman who is being paid for services, as soon as that money is exchanged or the promise of money is exchanged to her, she no longer can medically consent. Her medical consent has gone out the window. And this is the thing that people don't realize. Well, she's consenting to it. No, she's not. No, she is not. Medically, if you are being promised financial gain, you are no longer able to medically consent. This is why, for example, in the United States, you can't buy organs, right? I can't go buy a kidney. That's illegal. That like
Black market.
organ donation in the United States or blood donation or any of this type of stuff is purely altruistic because which altruistic is voluntary, right?
Yeah.
If you are volunteering a kidney, for example, it has to be fully of your own free will and there's no financial, like you literally cannot pay that money, pay that person anything. If you are caught doing so, you've broken like a slew of laws. And this is why we look at countries that, like you said, have black market organs, like organ situations, and we think that they're icky, right? As
Yeah,
we should.
it's
We,
horrifying.
we think like that is medically and ethically
Yeah.
an icky situation,
Mm-hmm.
as it should be. You don't want to see these stories of people that are waking up in bathtubs full of ice and their kidneys missing, right? Like
Well,
we've
and
heard those
you
stories.
you hear about hospitals taking your placentas too and selling them for 30 grand or whatever, and we think that's horrifying as well.
Right, exactly. And again, so like you cannot medically consent to any of this once money is being exchanged. Again, this is a situation where we fully recognize this in our society, but surrogacy comes along and we go, we're just going to throw all that out we're just going to ignore all of that because it just is inconvenient and we want babies. And so, like, we're just going to start
And it's
paying
a
people for babies.
beautiful sacrificial thing, and
Yeah,
you're
it's
helping a family
just,
have a baby. That's all.
it's just
That's literally
wild.
what covers this all up. We put a pretty little bow on it and say you're helping a family have a family. You're helping this couple with their dream of wanting to be. They deserve to be parents. That's one thing that I always hear, and this is like so controversial for me to say, but none of us humans are owed another human. It doesn't matter how if you deserve it, if you would be the best mom in the world, if you guys have all the means, if you have all the best intentions, nobody is owed another human. Those desires, like I've said so many times, are God given. They're good. They're right. But when our flesh comes in, it can turn it into this whole monstrous situation. And honestly, most of these intending parents have no idea. They have no idea that they're doing this. They have no idea that this baby has a primal wound and believes that their mother
Yeah,
is dead. They have
yeah.
no idea. And that's why conversations like this matter. And I just really, really hope that people are listening to this with an open mind instead of being hard hearted and covering it
Hmm.
up with this is sacrificial, this is love, this is amazing. But instead, like, really, really sitting with the uncomfortableness of this whole conversation. It is uncomfortable. It's hard to talk about. I get so much
Yeah.
hate every time I mention it. So
Hmm.
much hate.
Same girl. I mean, even like I tell people all the time, like, name another situation where your doctor is going to try to get you to do something that is medically risky
Mm-hmm.
for money.
Mm.
Is there another situation where your doctor is going to sit down with you and be like, hey, I really think that you should do this thing that is risky to your health? Again, we've already gone over that surrogate pregnancies are significantly more medically risky than biological pregnancies,
Mm-hmm.
okay? The risk to this woman is significantly higher. The risk to the child is significantly higher than a biological mother baby situation, right? And so, hey, go ahead, take on this risk and do it for financial gain. Please tell me of another situation where a medical professional would ever say that. They're not, except in this case. Except in surrogate situations
Mm,
is the only time that they're willing to turn a blind eye and look the other way,
yeah.
right? And again, it's because a lot of these fertility clinics are getting referrals. They're making money off
Mm,
of their referrals
yeah.
to surrogate agency. They're all
Yeah.
interconnected,
Big
right? Like
fertility. It's a
the
big
fertility
fertility.
clinics, yeah, the IVF clinics are connected to the surrogate agencies, and they're all the sperm and egg banks, and like
Yeah.
they're all in cahoots with one another, and
They
they're all
all
getting
have their
kickbacks.
connections with
They're
each
all getting
other.
kickbacks for referring these couples
Right.
like through the process, right?
Okay.
And so, like, yeah, the financial incentive is ridiculous. I literally saw a story of a surrogate who she was already had carried two surrogate pregnancies. Both of them had horrible outcomes.
Mm.
It was for parents, intended parents that were over in other countries, which is
Mhm.
another thing that happens. People in other countries will use American
Yeah.
surrogates as well.
Yep.
Don't even get me started on the
Well, it's usually the
security, the
countries.
national security risk that we have from that with China and other things is
It's usually the
crazy.
countries that surrogacy is banned in. I actually watched this lady on TikTok a couple of years
Hmm.
ago. Maybe you've seen her story. She was a surrogate. I don't know if it was twins or one baby, I forget. But the parents never
Yep.
came.
Yes,
I think they
abandoned
were from
children through
China,
surrogacy is
and they
huge.
kept
Yeah,
saying like, "Oh, we're working on our visas. Oh,
not
I
the
don't know.
same.
I don't know what's going on." And finally, this woman is like, I'm keeping the babies because they
Yeah,
are
I mean,
1 years old now."
I
Like,
think they're like four now. Yeah, they're almost four now. But yeah, I mean that happens all the time. That's another thing that people don't realize. The amount of children that are abandoned through this process is
mm,
absolutely wild. Here in the U.S., it's happening all the time, and over in other these other countries, especially these big surrogate hotspots, again like Ukraine and Georgia. Um, Children are abandoned all the time. The
mm,
IEPs, yeah, they just
dip.
don't show up, or like you said, or if a child is found to have a
Oh
disability
yeah.
or
Or
they're
you're
born with
told
any
to
type of a
abort
problem.
them.
I paid for a perfect baby.
Yeah.
You did not provide me the perfect baby that I
Hmm.
paid for, so not my problem. You can keep them. You figure out what to do with them. It
Yeah.
happens all the time. Um, and so literally this woman, she was going to a therapist because she was already struggling with the two surrogacies that she had had. Um, she was emotionally dealing with, again, postpartum depression, all of this stuff that had happened. But their financial situation was, again, not good because a lot of these women get into this for financial, gain because they need the money, but they spend that money and then they're right back in the same situation where they need it again, right? And so that's
Mhm.
why you'll see them doing multiple
Yeah.
surrogacies back to back. And so she was in a situation where financially they needed the money. She had been going to this therapist to deal with the trauma from her surrogacies. This therapist tells her, "Hey, you need the money. I actually know a couple that needs a surrogate." She connected her patient to a couple that need. Can you imagine all of the ethical things behind a therapist
Doesn't
who
that
is
like
seeing a woman like,
doesn't
and she ended up doing the surrogacy because again they needed the money, but I'm like the ethics
that
around this when you
violates so many different things though, right? Like
it's
I that's a
absolutely wild.
violation.
Again, we have medical professionals who are literally turning a blind
Oh
eye
my
to
gosh.
all of the ethics involved in this because they are literally suggesting to these women to do something that is dangerous for them to do for financial incentive, which is wildly unethical. Um,
Well, it is
it,
one of the fastest and legal ways to make a big lump sum of money. Like, yes, a
yes,
pregnancy is 9, 10 months long, but in reality, like, hey, I really want a down payment on my house. I'm just gonna pop out a baby in 9 months, and I'm gonna be given this amount of money. And I believe it's more if you have a cesarean, and it's more if there's twins. So there's like so many
yeah,
different, parts to this where women are getting this huge lump sum of money, and it feels worth it to them because they're like, oh my gosh, I paid off my debt. Oh my gosh, we have a house now. Oh my gosh, my
right.
husband was able to buy a boat. Oh my gosh, we bought a car. Like, it is like one of the fastest and legal
Well, and
ways.
they get addicted to that high of being
Yes.
able to provide that kind of money.
Yeah. I've been
Which
asked so
I
many
mean,
times because I love giving birth. I advocate for birth and home birth and mother baby and all of that. I get asked all the time, well, why don't you become a surrogate? You love birth so much. And I'm like, I love birth so much. I would never become a surrogate. I actually had a stranger online ask me if I'd be her surrogate. And I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
no.
it's wild, man.
The
But
entitlement that people have to other women's wombs is crazy. It's like they
because we've
get in this.
created this culture that's just so accepting of it and just
Right.
like, well, why would you not? And like you're looked at like we've already talked about the amount of hate that we get. We are looked at like the weirdos
Yeah.
for stating that this is not okay. Like
Yeah.
this is wrong on so many
Yeah.
levels, and we're looked at like we're crazy. And I'm just like, no, you guys are the crazy ones. I'm not crazy. This is crazy. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? These are real human beings. These are real lives at stake here.
Yeah.
And we are putting people in such precarious situations that are just like unimaginable. Um, One of the things that I wanted to dig into also was like overseas, right? Again, we know Americans are one of the number one consumers of surrogates over in these third world countries because it's cheaper. They can get a surrogate for way, 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 way less cost than what it is here in the US, right?
Mhm.
Um, and even the little bit of like legal regulation that we slightly have around it, if they don't want to deal with that, they can go over there and they're none of that. They can just do whatever they want, right? And so we're seeing massive surrogate industries again. Ukraine, big one. Georgia, big one. Kenya is popping up as a big one, and Kenya
Mhm.
doesn't even legally allow it. The Philippines doesn't legally allow it, but they're having huge underground
Yeah.
surrogate industries pop up.
Mhm.
Again, you're in countries where women are dealing with significant poverty. Like,
Right.
you know, $500 American would change this woman's life, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about like that's enough. That's more than what she would see in like 10 years of work over in some of these places. Mexico is another one that is popping up as a huge surrogate
Yeah.
hotspot, where Americans are going to have babies. But one of the things that I want to warn people about that they're not thinking about is once these clinics and agencies have your genetic material, you have no idea what they are doing with it,
Yeah.
you guys. Especially when you get into Kenya, Mexico. Like, hello? Like, they don't have even close to the organization and documentation processes that
Yeah.
we have here in the United States. You have no idea what they are doing with your eggs, with your sperm, with your embryos
Mm.
that you are creating.
I mean, they could straight
And
up lie to you and be like, oh, none of them took. Sorry,
yep,
we lost all 20 of your embryos that we had. I have no idea what happened
we
to
have
those.
seen this happen. So one of the countries that shut down back in 2021, India. India was a
Oh,
booming
yeah.
surrogate market. India banned surrogacy because of its connections to human trafficking in the
Yeah.
black market. And not only that, what they were doing to these women. They were literally, and this is still happening in a lot of these countries where surrogacy is happening. They take these pregnant women who are surrogates. Not only are they tricking them into surrogacy to begin with, a lot of times they're telling them, oh, you're going to become a maid. We're going to take you to be a maid and clean these people's houses. They're running underground surrogacy operations, and
Mm.
they're using a business as a cover business, right?
Right.
To have maids. They're not like, but these women don't know that. They think that they're truly going to go be a maid. And like, this Kenya woman thinks, oh, I'm going to go be a maid and make some money. No, she's being taken to be a surrogate, and she has no idea that this is
Mm.
about to happen to her. So a lot of these women are getting tricked into it. They don't know what's happening to them. But not only that, they'll take them and they lock them in these surrogate houses where they literally have bars on the windows and doors. These women are not allowed to leave for the entire 9-month duration of their surrogacy. They're not even allowed to go outside. They were doing this in India. They literally had storehouses
Oh my
of
God.
surrogates where they would just
Like
keep them in
cattle.
this housing. It's insane. And so not only was it what was happening to these babies, but even these women, but one of the main things that was happening over in India that they found was that so with the fertility meds that these women are on, we know that they are more likely to get pregnant with multiples, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things that happens through fertility medications and treatments and all of that. Multiples is at an increased risk, right? And also when they're implanting multiple
Right.
embryos because they want a higher chance for her
Right.
to
For at
get
least
pregnant
one
with a
to
live
stick.
birth.
Yep.
And the chances of her carrying one of those babies to term is very, very low. So they want to
Yep.
increase her ability of like, one of them's going to stick, right?
Right.
So we'll put a couple in there and pray that one of them sticks. But if they both do, then you've got twins or triplets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which this is very common in surrogate situations. So what they were finding in India, it's so bad, you guys. They were finding that these women were getting pregnant with twins and triplets, but the intended parents here in America were told that it was a singleton baby. They were told that there's only one baby. They weren't told that she was pregnant with twins and triplets. And when you're over in America and your surrogate is in India, you don't
Oh
see this
my
woman. Most of
God.
them don't even know who these women are. In fact, the agencies oftentimes will not allow any communication.
They communicate. Oh
Yes.
my
They
God.
literally keep them cut off intentionally. They do this in the Ukraine, they do this in Georgia. It's very common that you do not have a relationship with the surrogate. They are intentionally kept separate from the intended parents, and that's because of all of the abuses and the shady crap that they're doing to these women. They don't want them talking to each other for a reason. So they never see this woman, right? They
Mm-hmm.
get like an ultrasound that could be
Oh,
fabricated. They have
easy.
no idea.
Easy.
They're told there's one baby. It's a singleton. So, okay,
Oh, and with
cool, great. We
AI
got our baby.
nowadays, can you imagine how much worse
God.
it's gonna get?
Yeah. So these people think like, okay, we got our baby. Like, great. They're told she delivered. They go over, they collect their baby,
Wow.
and they go home, never knowing that there were twins or triplets involved. And what they were finding is that they were selling the twins and the triplets
Hmm.
on the black
Oh yeah,
market
I
for
believe
more
it.
money. The amount of people who have bought surrogates in
Wow.
other countries who have other children out there and they have no idea that these children even exist. They're also selling their embryos on the black market. They are selling their sperm and eggs without them know. I mean, again, once you give up that genetic material, you have no way
Hmm.
of knowing what these people are doing with your genetic material, you guys. Like, none. And it's not regulated, right? We've already been over the deregulation of all of this and like how it's just the wild, wild west. Like, you have no way of knowing anything that they're doing. You could have children who
That you don't
exist in
know
the
about.
world and you have no idea where they are, that they even exist. Like, it's
Or if they're
wild.
even alive anymore.
Or that
Where
they
are
were
they?
given to a pedophile. You don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like
The highest
yeah,
bidder.
it's insane, dude. Like the things that are going on, and again, India shut it down. It got so out of control in India that they shut it down. They were like, no more. Like this is done. Like the abuses that were running rampant for these women and these children, it got out of control again. And there were children being abandoned in the country that the
Hmm.
state was like, what do we do with these children
Yeah.
that no one came to collect? We can't adopt them out because they're like wards of the state and they have like this weird, they're
Oh,
in this weird
interesting.
limbo phase and like it's just like yeah, people have no idea the levels that these things go to and how much they're being lied to. Like you'll talk to even intended parents who've sat down and done some of these interviews and now they're on the other side of it and they're like this is wrong. And because of our experience and what we had to learn the hard way, we are now speaking out against surrogacy. They're not as
Mm.
common as the surrogates that are speaking
Yeah.
out, but you're starting to
I
see
think it's
even intended.
easier for the surrogates to kind of
Yeah.
like realize because they're left with empty arms, right? And so,
Yes. Right.
that depression, the
The
anxiety, all of
devastation
that.
is much more prevalent for them. Yeah,
Yes.
in the immediate too.
Yes.
So where the intended parents usually don't start to put the pieces together of what happened to them until like way after the fact of like, wait a minute. We were very much lied
Yeah.
to. We were very much taken advantage of. Now, are there people walking into surrogacy fully aware of what they're doing and they don't care and they're doing it anyway?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They are fully aware that they're
Yeah.
taking advantage of these impoverished women. They're fully aware of and they just don't care.
Mhm.
But the majority of people are not educated on what is actually happening and the fact that they are just being blatantly lied to
Yep.
by these agencies that they're putting their full trust into. We've seen where they were being told that these women again were going to be given money, right? Like because they're paying so much every month that's supposed to go towards this woman and her upkeep and her care, her medical
Mhm.
bills, all of that.
Prenatal, all of it.
Yeah, a lot of times again
Food,
they don't want them
clothes.
communicating But this one couple, they found out that their surrogate, she had been bleeding for weeks.
Hmm.
She is somehow, like, through like a family member was able to reach out to
Hmm.
the surrogate parents here in America. She's a Mexican woman. She was able to reach out and get in contact with them somehow. They get an email that she's been bleeding for weeks and they're on the verge of losing their twins.
Wow.
And so they're like, "What? What the heck? We were told that you were being given prenatal care." No, the agency cuts it off because once they get to a certain point in pregnancy, they don't want to pay for it anymore. If they're even hardly paying for anything to begin with. Like,
Hmm.
these women are being promised all of this stuff that is not happening. And then they
Hmm.
also found out that they were paying, like, I think it was like $2,000 a month, and like 800 of that was supposed to be going to the surrogate. She
She
wasn't getting
didn't get it.
any of that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, this is very common where they'll find out like the money we're paying is not going to her, or the prenatal care that we think that we're paying for, she's not actually getting any of that. And we already know that these pregnancies are higher risk. And so when they cut off that prenatal care, these children are being born with massive complications. In the Ukraine, we're seeing babies that are being oxygen deprived, and
Hmm.
they have cerebral palsy and all of these things, and then the IPs decide
We're
there's
not
something
gonna
wrong with
let
them.
that
We
be.
don't want them. We're just not going to go get them. They can just, and it's because they cut off prenatal care, and this woman had this baby prematurely,
Hmm.
and there's no care for her. And I mean, not only that, but you just also have to think of the level of health care in some of these countries.
Right.
Like, we are accustomed to a certain level of things here in the United States.
Hmm.
When you get over in the Ukraine, is a whole nother world of like healthcare
Right.
there. Mexico, it's not like it's not pretty, you guys, and you're bringing these usually premature medically complicated babies into countries where they're not equipped to they don't have the NICUs that we have here. They don't have the equipment that we have here. And so these babies are dying, these women are dying in Kenya. I mean, their surrogate rate of I mean, just their rate of women dying in childbirth alone is bad, right? Let alone a surrogate. And then on top of that, like, you're risking your life. You almost die in this situation, and then the surrogate agency gone. They just disappear. They just ghost these women. They get no money. They get nothing that they were promised, and they just disappear. It's absolutely horrible. Like, we have to get outside of the American bubble
Hmm.
and look at this thing on a global scale
Right.
of like, what are we
Because
truly doing?
even what's happening here in America is horrific.
Oh, it's bad enough here. Like I said, we don't even, I mean, we haven't even dug into the things that are I mean, just briefly, we've dug into some of the things that are happening here. But yeah, when you get over into these other countries,
Wow.
it's absolutely atrocious, the things that are happening to these women and children.
Hmm.
Um, Even here in the United States, there was a surrogate situation that I just saw recently where she was lied to completely. She thought she was giving a baby to a married couple, a husband and a wife.
Hmm.
She gets into her pregnancy. She's pregnant with triplets, by the way, 3 babies.
Hmm.
That's expensive,
Yeah.
right? She has to have double the
Yeah.
amount of medical visits
Yeah.
and prenatal visits and ultrasounds. All that stuff is increased because you have a surrogate pregnancy, which is high risk, but now a triplet pregnancy, which is
Right.
even more high risk, right? So the bills are stacking up. We even see cases here where women, their medical bills are not being paid, even though they're promised that it will. There are surrogates right now who are sitting with significant medical debt because the IPs and the agencies never paid it.
Wow.
Um, and it's all being contested in court and stuff. But this woman, anyway, so she starts going to all these medical appointments, and she had only interacted with the dad, which she thought was weird. But she was being told that there was a woman involved,
Uh-huh.
but she never got to actually meet the woman, which she always thought was pretty odd. But she was just like, all right, well, I mean, it's their thing, and like, I have to
They're
just like do what I'm
dynamic.
told.
Yeah.
Yep, they're dynamic. I'm just gonna do what I'm told, right? Um, she gets into a situation where he starts telling her, "Can you reduce your amount of medical visits because I can't afford this. I can't afford 3 babies." He also wanted her to reduce the pregnancy, which a
Yep.
lot of people don't realize they'll do
It's quite
with
common.
multiples. They will, yeah, either in the life of the triplet or
Yeah.
in the life of the twin
Hmm.
because of the risk and all of that, right? But he was just like, I can't afford it. I can't afford the medical costs for triplets. I can't afford triplets. I can't afford this many babies. And she was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not risking my own medical welfare because
Yeah.
you've decided all of a sudden that you can't afford this.
Hmm.
You need to pay for this, dude. Like, this is not my problem. And this is a higher risk pregnancy. Come to find out, she finds out that this is a single man who's 50 years old, who lives in the basement of his mother's home.
Oh my gosh.
There's no woman, there's no married couple. This is a single man who commissioned the birth of these children, and he lives with his mother.
Wow.
And he doesn't have any money. Imagine that, or very little money. He had just enough to do the process, basically, and that was about it. And so she starts like being like, and then she starts finding out information about this man and his background, which is very disturbing as far as how it involves children.
Mm-hmm.
And she starts to get very concerned, and she's like, I am not handing over these babies to this man. Absolutely not. I was lied to about this whole situation. I would have never agreed to make babies for a man who is a single man. Like, what is his interest in having babies? Like, this is wild, right? So she starts the court process to like contest the surrogacy. Even his own sister advocates for the surrogate, that her brother should not have these babies. It was like a really, really bad situation. Well, the court ended up siding with him. He took the babies.
Love that.
When the babies were 6 weeks old, guess who got called?
CPS.
CPS, because he left triplet babies at home alone for hours by themselves. And I guess CPS has been called on this man multiple times. These children are 6 years old now, and CPS has been involved with him multiple times for leaving these children home alone, unattended, neglecting them, like all kinds of crazy situations. And yeah, I mean, the court, I mean, at the end of the day, it's his genetic material, right? And this is why a lot of times gestational surrogacy is used, is because they don't want her to have a claim on these children biologically.
Yeah.
They want to use a separate egg, a separate sperm donor, and a separate woman.
It makes it
because
more clean on.
Yep. Legal lines are drawn of, you cannot have a claim on this child because it is not biologically yours, and the biology overrides everything else. Ironic how that works. Mm-hmm. We ignore the biology when it comes to ripping this child away from the mother that they've bonded to in pregnancy. Biology doesn't matter at that point.
No, heck no. And
we're also creating children. Yeah, and we're creating children that sometimes the IPs are not even biologically related, right? Sometimes they're using a separate egg and a separate sperm. They're not even, right. They're not even necessarily all the time even biologically related. So biology doesn't matter then, but in the court of law, when the surrogate is suddenly saying, hold up, wait a minute, this person should not have this baby, red flag, then it's, well, the biology overrides, and now the biology is suddenly important again. Mm-hmm. Interesting how that works.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like we could just continue talking for literally hours, so maybe we'll have to do like a part 2 of this episode sometime. Yeah, but yeah, so if you have any resources that you recommend or you send to people, I would love if you could send those to me so I could put those in the show notes. And also, where can people find you if they want to follow your TikTok? If you have Instagram, where are you advocating against all of this? And
yeah, so I'm on TikTok. I have 2 different accounts. So my main account is lifeunlimited_PLA. I do a lot of my pro-life advocacy, anti-abortion activism, and anti-abortion education there. And then my other account is the medical repro ethics, which is where you found me. And that is my page that I do all of the third-party reproduction stuff. Okay. So that's going to be, surrogacy, IVF, sperm and egg donation, all of that.
I appreciate you coming on, and you just have so much knowledge and things that I didn't even think of or even know. So yeah, we'll definitely have to communicate on, doing another episode, maybe diving deeper into specific topics. I'm just so thankful to have had a conversation with somebody who is also passionately against this topic and just, again, has so much wisdom. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on. And that concludes today's episode. If you found value in this conversation or resonate with it in any way, I'd love for you to leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening in on and share about it on social media. Your support means the world. For more content like this, you can follow me at Corinne Adele on all platforms. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.